Welcome to Learning Thursdays. I'm Dean Hale with the OASAS Learning and Development Unit and your host for today's presentation. Today's presentation is titled Professional Boundaries and Reporting Requirements Guidance for OASAS Credentialing Applicants and Professionals. And joining me today is Danielle Hosterman and Colleen Stanek from the New York State OASAS Credentialing Unit. But first, a word about Learning Thursdays. Learning Thursdays are offered to behavioral health professionals as a free learning opportunity with the goal of improving the knowledge and skills of the New York State substance use disorder workforce as we strive to improve the lives of individuals needing prevention, treatment, and recovery services. A goal of Learning Thursdays is to support the professional development of the treatment, prevention, and recovery workforce. We do this by offering regular presentations that are relevant to today's substance use disorder treatment professional. As always, if there are any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to contact us at the Learning Thursdays mailbox. You can use the same mailbox to express an interest in providing a future Learning Thursdays program. And now it's time to start the presentation and welcome our presenters.
Hello, my name is Danielle Hosterman, and as Dean said, I'm here with Colleen Stanek, and today's presentation is Professional Boundaries and Reporting Requirements, Guidance for OASAS Credentialing Applicants and Professionals. The purpose of this training is to learn about maintaining professional boundaries and provide education on mandated reporting to the Justice Center and OASAS Credentialing Unit. These are two different agencies that need to be reported to depending on the situation. The first section of this training is going to discuss how a staff member can develop and maintain professional boundaries to support a safe and therapeutic environment. The second half of the training will discuss reporting requirements for boundary violations, specifically who is responsible for making a report, where to make a report, and when to make a report. This training is meant for people interested in becoming credentialed in substance use treatment. This includes people who have applied for their CASAC, people who have earned a CASAC trainee certificate, and people who have earned a CASAC credential. OASAS credentials include CASAC applicant trainees, CASACs, Credentialed Prevention Professional, which is a CPP, Credentialed Prevention Specialist, CPS. As mentioned, we will first discuss professional boundaries, which is a broad topic. The focus of this training will be to help staff understand their roles in maintaining professional boundaries and how to identify when boundary lines get blurred. Professional boundaries are an important part of creating a therapeutic environment. Maintaining professional boundaries allows clients to live their own self-directed lives, clarifies staff roles and responsibilities, and is a tool to help maintain staff and clients' well-being. Many boundary violations happen unintentionally or can be open to interpretation. What one person sees as a boundary violation may not be interpreted that way by somebody else. This presentation will include several case scenarios based off of real cases to show how a staff member can cross a boundary line without meaning to, and the unintended consequences of crossing that boundary line. There is an inherent power imbalance when somebody enters treatment. The counselor is in a position where they have more power than the person that they are seeing. They have access to a person's life history. They can often control how the client interacts with their family and friends out in the community, and they can have an impact on legal consequences. All of these factors put clients in a vulnerable position to be abused or neglected, which is why the OASAS is included in the Justice Center's scope of oversight. When helping is hurting, professional boundaries are essential to helping clients reach their treatment potential. It's important to ask yourself, is this action in the best interest of the client? Boundaries need to be communicated first verbally and then with actions. You as a staff member are responsible for making sure this happens. There isn't one definition for professional boundaries. Every situation will require staff members to use critical thinking and assess the situation. When in doubt, remind yourself to ask, is this in the best interest of the client? Am I doing something for the client that they could reasonably do for themselves? An example of this would be if a counselor saw a previous client sleeping on the streets and invited the client to stay in their spare bedroom. The counselor knows the person doesn't have somewhere safe to go, and they had the intention of helping them get off the streets. However, by doing this, they are preventing the person from taking their own initiative and living their own self-determined life. this type of incident would be reportable as a CASAC complaint. So what are some examples of what a professional boundary is? Professional boundaries are defined in the Justice Center Code of Conduct, which is signed by every custodian. Professional boundaries are defined in the OASAS Canon of Ethical Principles, Misconduct, or Other Prohibited Acts included in the OASAS Part 853 Credentialing of Addiction Professionals Regulations. These are signed by every person who applies for an OASAS credential as it is part of the CASAC application. Professional boundaries are essential to keeping a safe and therapeutic environment. And professional boundaries are established by the behavior of the staff and based on the needs of the person receiving services. So as a staff member, it is your responsibility to maintain professional boundaries and help meet the needs of the clients. So we're going to talk briefly about the history of the Justice Center. It was developed to provide oversight to 6 state agencies that serve some of the state's most vulnerable populations. OASAS was included in this because many of our clients, as I mentioned in the previous slide, do have different types of experiences going on in their life, which make them vulnerable to be exploited, for example, or taken advantage of, or abused or neglected in some other way. The Code of Conduct allows people receiving services, as defined by the Justice Center, to live self-directed, meaningful lives in their communities, free from abuse and neglect, and protected from harm. They use the term mandated reporter to define the staff that are responsible for making sure that reports of abuse and neglect or other significant incidents are reported to the agency. When you are hired and annually thereafter, you'll sign this form, the Code of Conduct, and as such, you are agreeing that you will provide person-centered care. There are 10 components of the Justice Center Code of Conduct listed on this slide, including person-centered approach, physical, emotional, and personal well-being of the clients and the staff, providing respect, dignity, and choice to the clients, helping clients provide or live a self-determined lives, maintaining healthy relationships, advocacy of clients, protecting personal health information and confidentiality, non-discrimination, meaning providing support to any clients that you encounter regardless of their personal backgrounds, integrity, responsibility, and professional competency of the custodians providing care, and finally, the reporting requirements of being a mandated reporter, meaning you need to report any incidents that you see to the Justice Center. The OASAS Canon of Ethical Principles is also signed by everybody who sends in a CASAC application. You are strongly encouraged to read the Canon of Ethical Principles thoroughly as you are signing this and to renew it as needed, to review it as needed. It is commonly known as the Canon of Ethics. As mentioned in the previous slide, it is a very long name, so we just refer to it as the Canon of Ethics. You must maintain the Canon of Ethics regardless of the role you are working in. So for example, if you are working as a peer and you have submitted a CASAC application, you are considered a CASAC applicant and you must abide by the Canon of Ethical Principles even when acting as a peer. The standards that you must meet are defined by OASAS. If you're looking for more information on this, you can check out the New York State Regulations 853. This is defined in those regulations. It is also found, as I said, in the CASAC application and on the OASAS website. So how do we keep a safe and therapeutic environment? These are some behaviors that a staff member can do to ensure that they're trying to maintain boundaries through their daily work. Reject favoritism. That means don't have a client that you're looking forward to seeing that day. Don't, make sure that you're treating your clients equally. It allows clients to openly share without fear of judgment or retaliation. This means that if something does happen, that they're able to go to somebody and share their concerns without being concerned about being discharged or having retaliation. It enables clients to fully advocate for their well-being. It helps promote staff and client wellness. Obviously, a safe and therapeutic environment is good for everybody. When you go to work and you know that you're going to be safe there, that helps you through your day. We want to encourage strong therapeutic relationships. A safe relationship is a therapeutic relationship, and when boundaries are maintained, you can have a strong therapeutic relationship. Professional boundaries support people who have experienced trauma. We all know that there's a lot of trauma that we encounter in our field, and many of the staff have trauma as well. So this is important for our staff members, your peers, family members that might visit, or any other community members. We understand that trauma is a part of a lot of our lives, and maintaining professional boundaries makes it a safe spot for anybody, regardless of the trauma. This all helps to support client recovery progress. A client who is able to advocate for themselves and who knows how to reach out for a supportive therapeutic session or go to the right person is a client who is more likely to have success in the future. As a staff member, it is your responsibility to help them build this. So here are some green flags of what a behavior is. We have this behavior continuum. You can see the red on the outside, we have under involvement and over involvement, and in the middle, the green, which is a therapeutic relationship. Just like a green light, stoplight, when it goes yellow, that's the spot where you have to pause and check to see what's going on. It doesn't inherently mean that you're crossing a boundary violation, but that's where it gets blurry. We want to try to stay in the green section as much as possible. And how do we do that? Because it's easier said than done. So we don't pay attention to private business while at work. We understand that there's a lot that goes on in people's lives, and it can be very distracting when something is happening in your personal life and you can bring it to work. And that can impact the therapeutic relationship if you're distracted by something on the outside. They provide support to their peers and clients. It's important to be a team worker to maintain professional boundaries. That means if one of your peers is asking for help them, provide support. We don't step in though and take over, and we don't just say no. So it's providing support when people need it. You're present and responsive when needed. So that means not going off and not being able to be found for several minutes. It means if you hear something that could be happening, you go check on it. It means being invested in what's going on in the treatment setting. You maintain confidentiality. This is very important in OASAS to maintain confidentiality of our clients. You're aware of how your actions impact others. So this reflects back to providing support or how you're paying attention at work. We don't all work in silos. We all do work with teams, and it's important that we recognize that as professionals. A staff member who's working in the therapeutic relationship is aware of treatment goals and relevant history. Now, we understand that you cannot be aware of every single person's treatment goals. However, be aware of your client's treatment goals and of what the general ideas are for other people. We don't expect that everybody knows all of the relevant history for every client, but know that it's there, that there is history and that there are treatment goals. And if you're struggling with something, figure out how to maybe learn the treatment goals or learn relevant history that could help you work with somebody. This is very essential to use your supervision effectively. This is where if you see yourself going into these yellow zones or just jumping right to the red zones, you can go to your supervisor. This is also an important part of boundaries, is to use your supervisor as needed on top of just your scheduled supervision. And importantly, a therapeutic relationship is working within the scope of practice. That as CASACs means you have to work within your CASAC scope of practice. You can't be giving medical advice or anything like that because that's not your scope of practice. If somebody's asking for medical advice, the appropriate thing would be to send them or suggest they go to get medical care or ask them to go see who they could find for the appropriate medication answer. So these are green flags. If you can work within this green area, use your common sense and critical thinking skills to just try to keep the healthy environment And again, this is just a reminder that it is based off of your actions as the staff member. So what are some red flags? It is often easier to see a red flag than a green flag. So for example, if we looked at all of what's the green behavior, a red flag would be anything outside of it. So instead of treating all clients equally, you're overly focused on a person or persons. And this can be in either a favoritism type of way or in a dislike kind of way. Boundaries can be anything from spending too much time with somebody to not spending enough time with somebody. Connecting with people on social media or outside of the clinical setting is a red flag, especially as a CASAC. Once a client, always a client. And connecting with somebody outside of treatment settings makes you vulnerable as a staff to information that they could now have, and it also blurs the lines of the therapeutic relationship. Keeping secrets, especially when treatment goals are impacted, is a red flag. Secrets in general are a red flag, so we try to go, if it's something that you want somebody to know but not share yet, that can be very different than a secret. Secrets are where you're asking the client to hold information and they have no outlet for it. It could be, oh, I'm late doing your treatment plan, just don't tell my supervisor. It's a small boundary violation, but it does put the responsibility on the client to make sure that you feel safe. Self-disclosure is another red flag. There may be a time for self-disclosure. This should only be done when it serves the need of the client. So that's when you're going to think and ask yourself, does this benefit the client? If you're sharing something because you think it will benefit them, we're not going to tell you not to. However, we want to make sure that when we share something, it's for the benefit of the client. Being unaware of a person's specific treatment plan or disregarding the plan based on your personal preference. So again, we don't expect people to know everybody's treatment plans. You should know the treatment plans of your clients, but we ask that people are aware of what the clients are working on, and we cannot dismiss it based on our personal preference. If you think that somebody should be working on something else or that they're focusing on something else, that's what we have our team meetings for, and you could always go to your supervisor. Speaking negatively about a person, especially in an unsecure location. When you are talking about something, whether it is confidential information or not, be aware of who is around you when you're talking about something, specifically if you're talking about a client. You want to make sure that nobody can overhear something and get something out of context. You want to make sure that nobody can overhear something in general. A lot of things are discussed that is very confidential and people have a right to privacy. So you just want to make sure that doors are closed all the way when you're having meetings, that you aren't speaking negatively about people. Try to keep it therapeutic and goal focused. And finally, keeping resentments towards a client. That's a red flag. We do have a lot of our clients who come back into treatment. So you want to make sure you're not holding a resentment towards something they did previously. We want to encourage growth and we accept growth of our clients. So keeping a resentment from a past treatment, or even if they did something to you the day before, when you are a staff member, it's your responsibility to work on that. Having said that, that doesn't mean that you can also just pull the person aside and say, we had issues last time. Let's just brush it under the rug and move on. But maybe it's something you could talk about with your supervisor and they could find a way to address it. But you as the staff, maybe consider not addressing it just head on right away. So what can you do every day? Ask yourself, what are my boundaries? How am I impacted when my boundaries are crossed? If you look at yourself and you do some self-reflection about what personal boundaries you have, that could help you understand a little bit more about what other people's boundaries are and how it can impact them. An example is physical space. We all have a lot of boundaries around our physical space. Somebody standing next to you, 3 feet away, might not be in your space. 2 feet away, might not be in your space. And then they get right next to you, and then they're in your space. So we have to keep this in mind, especially with trauma-informed care, how our boundaries, whether physical or emotional or psychological, are impacted. And doing them, our own assessment of them is something you can work on in supervision, which we'll go into a little bit later. Act as a role model. Reminder, as a staff member, you are there to show people, you're there to be a counselor and to show people how to live a successful life. You are a role model to the clients about how to live or how to have professional boundaries. Demonstrating that yourself, show and let them know that it's not just do as I say, it's do as I do. Use supervision. Professional boundaries include a lot of gray area, and your supervisor can provide guidance for you. Go to them when you identify your own boundaries. Go to them if you're saying, I don't think I have any boundaries. Your supervisor is there to help you through this. Attend continuous education in areas of trauma-informed care, internal bias, cultural competency, and other related topics. Professional boundaries covers a lot of different topics, and in almost every facet of what we do, there is something that the counselor has to think and do and understand how it's impacting a boundary. And importantly, be aware of the red flags and enhance your opportunity to model green flags. It's not just about what I can't do, it's about what you can do. It's not about stopping you from having a personality or anything like that. It's just encouraging you to identify where you can implement green flags and have a productive life or a productive workday. As a reminder, it is the staff member's responsibility to manage these professional boundaries. So our next couple of slides are going to be covering case scenarios. These are based on real life instances, but identifying information has been changed. Boundary violations can seem harmless or be overtly harmful. The following slides are showing more quote unquote harmless behavioral or boundary violations, but we're going to talk a little bit about how they can be very harmful in the long run. So our first example is about CASAC trainee Kenneth. Kenneth is walking down the hall and he notices a client, Molly, has something in her hair. He reaches out to her to remove it, and Molly flinches back. Later, Kenneth is called into his supervisor's office because Molly reported feeling intimidated when Kenneth reached towards her, and she didn't know why he would touch her. So here's some things to take into consideration for this. Kenneth wasn't Molly's primary counselor, and he didn't know her history. He doesn't know her personal history or her treatment goals because he's not her primary counselor. He was unaware that she had a history of trauma with men touching her. Kenneth apologized to his supervisor and agreed to take a training on trauma-informed care. There's many other outcomes from this. It could have been Molly immediately went and reported it to the Justice Center or OASAS, and then there would have been no chance for Kenneth to learn about her history, and that is a right that Molly would have had to do, is to make that report. Maybe the supervisor asks Kenneth in, and Molly has a chance to hear an apology if Molly wants that. There's a lot of room for Kenneth to have some educational opportunities here. And of note, it's important that he acknowledges that rather than just denying that he did anything wrong, because from Molly's perspective, he triggered her past trauma and she did feel like it was inappropriate that he reached out to her. So Kenneth needs to recognize that as somebody in treatment, she does have that right to have nobody touch her and to have to make the report as needed. Our next example is about Maria. She has been working as a peer and now is working towards her CASAC credential. She has submitted an application for this. While at work, a client she previously worked with as a peer, named Ben, is talking with her about how he can't find a ride to his next probation meeting. Maria offers to drive Ben as long as it won't interfere with her work hours. She gives him her cell phone number to call her and set up a time for a pickup, and she drives him to his meeting. The next day, Ben brings in a hot coffee and a donut for Maria as a thank you for driving him. They spend about an hour talking about how the meeting went and what he got out of it. A further elaboration on this could be that they continue to have these meetings every day. They meet for an hour and talk about what's going on. Ben starts bringing her hot coffee and donut every morning. Ben texts Maria outside of work just to see how she's doing now that he has her number. This is an example that could quickly spiral into the bright red flag section. As it is already there, but it could quickly get more abusive or neglectful. So just for consideration, Maria is acting outside the scope of practice by driving him to his meeting, accepting a coffee and donut, and talking with him for an hour. She is not working as a peer in this moment. She is working towards her CASAC, and as somebody who has submitted her CASAC application, she is required to abide by the Canon of Ethics. The Canon of Ethics specifically indicates you cannot have a relationship with the client outside of treatment. She might not be considering how accepting a gift appears to others. Perhaps people on her caseload have seen Ben bring in presents and they don't understand why they're meeting with Maria, but maybe they don't get time to meet with Maria, or maybe Maria's not understanding that they're seeing this happen. And Maria is also not encouraging Ben to seek out appropriate resources. We cannot fix everybody's problems, and there are resources out there that perhaps Maria could have guided Ben towards. She could have suggested he speak to his primary counselor to talk about this. Was it something he needed to do at this time? There's a lot of room for Maria to encourage Ben to problem solve this on his own, which would ultimately help him a lot more in the long run than just driving him to the meeting and then crossing these boundaries with him. At the end of the day, Ben can make an allegation of inappropriate conduct towards Maria. If it came down to that, he could make a report saying, I have her number, we've been meeting outside of treatment. And so those are things that Maria should consider when she's trying to understand protecting herself as well. So our next example is Bernie is responsible for taking a group of people to a community activity. While out, Bernie notices some of his friends and invites them over to join the group. The group of friends get along well with the clients, and it seems everyone is having fun. However, the next day, Bernie is called into the office because one of the clients was concerned that Bernie violated his confidentiality, and he was unhappy that he invited his friends to join. So what do we consider in this case scenario? Though unintentional, the client felt his privacy was violated. Bernie might not have said, I'm taking these clients out for treatment. He might not have even said, or for an outside activity, he might not have said, these are clients. However, Bernie has been in treatment for a while, and he knows that people look at groups like this and knows that something's going on, maybe. Or maybe maybe the counselor did say something about who the clients were. There's also that the clients may not have felt comfortable speaking up in the group, especially if others didn't appear to mind. Peer pressure is still very real for our clients sometimes. And if it seemed like everybody else was fine with it, then the client might not have spoken up because they didn't want to get retaliation from their peers. Also, perhaps they didn't have a good relationship with the counselor, and they were worried if they said something that the counselor might take it out against them. So this is where it's important to have a therapeutic relationship with all of the clients, and have the culture of a safe therapeutic culture in the agency to make sure that the clients do feel safe and comfortable speaking up. It's also important to note that the counselor could have been distracted by his friends which removed attention from his job duties. As somebody responsible for guiding people in the community, it's not just about getting people outside, it's about making sure they're outside and still safe. Anything could have happened if somebody picked up something and brought it back to the program. That could have come back down on the counselor. And it could it have been because he was distracted by his friends? We're not sure. So these are the things where it's just important to be safe and question, why am I doing this? If you asked himself if it was in the best interests of the clients, he probably would have said no. For our last example, we're going to talk about Caitlin. She's a new CASAC, and one of the clients in the program, Taryn, is an old friend from high school. Caitlin and Taryn are connected on Facebook from their high school days, and one day Caitlin is called into her supervisor's office because Taryn was showing other clients a picture from Caitlin's Facebook page of her out drinking. So what do we take into consideration for these examples? For this example, Caitlin had not informed her supervisor about knowing Taryn. So that up front, if somebody you know has entered treatment, you need to inform your supervisor. If Caitlin had informed her supervisor about knowing Taryn previously, they could have put in safety measures, such as ensuring Caitlin and Taryn that Taryn wouldn't be assigned to Caitlin's caseload, for example, or to remind Caitlin to make her Facebook private, to tell her to be considerate of what she has on her Facebook. We can't tell you what to have on your Facebook, but when it comes to professional boundaries, be aware of what is out there. Other clients could have seen other clients did see these pictures as Taryn was showing them, and it could impact how they see Caitlin. Whether the picture is new or 15 years old, people don't know that. So it's about making sure that you want to make sure that your character is presented how you want it to be presented. And an important way of doing that is professional boundaries, making sure you're not connected with people outside of work, and reporting when you know somebody outside of treatment. I encourage you to think about these case studies and others more in depth. There is, as I have mentioned several times, there are a lot of factors to consider, and it is your responsibility as the staff to make those decisions in real time and ensure that you're doing the healthiest thing for the clients. So as mentioned, half of this presentation is going to be about making the reports when you do notice boundary violations. So reportable incidents should be assessed individually to determine where a report is needed. Most of our staff are mandated reporters for the New York State Justice Center, and any OASAS credentialing staff are also required to report Canon of ethic violations to OASAS. We can't mandate anybody else to report to us, but if you are credentialed through us, you are a required reporter if somebody violates the canon of ethics. The first report you make should be to the Justice Center unless medical emergency services are needed. The Justice Center requires reports to be made immediately. As a mandated reporter, nobody can stop you from making a report. However, we do encourage individual assessment, and sometimes that does mean going to a supervisor or a peer for guidance. However, nobody can stop you from making a report. Failing to make a necessary report when needed can lead to an obstruction investigation by the Justice Center. So agency policy cannot override the Justice Center policy. Your agency might require that you make a report to leadership. They might require that you fill out a significant incident form or some type of other form or paperwork. But they cannot tell you not to make a report. And it is your responsibility if somebody says, okay, I'll report it, and it doesn't get reported and you knew about it, that is still on you. So it's your responsibility to make sure something is reported. Every report that's made to the Justice Center is given a verification number, and you can get this number when you make the report. We encourage you to hold on to that. So for example, if an agency policy has one reporter, the best practice would be for you to get the reporting number and verify that it was reported if you didn't make the report. So what do we report to the Justice Center? We report abuse, alleged abuse and or neglect by a custodian, alleged significant incident involving a custodian, and when in doubt, make a report. There is no need to do a fact-finding or an investigation into more details. When you make a report to the Justice Center, report what you have. You can always call back with more information. You can also complete the form. There is a web form on the Justice Center's website that you can complete. However, this form should only be used for reporting significant incidents. Any abuse or neglect incident should be called so that the call center agent can walk you through the details of making the report, and so that they can make sure that they get all the details they need to classify the incident appropriately. So there are 3 different classifications for a Justice Center report. It's abuse, neglect, or a significant incident, or a non-Justice Center incident. But like as I said, it is your responsibility to make sure it's reported and provide the information as much as possible without doing an investigation so that the Justice Center can classify the incident appropriately. Their hotline is open 24 hours, 365, and it is 1-855-373-2122. Your next step, if you are a credentialed employee or the incident is about a credentialed employee or somebody who has applied to become a credentialed employee, is to fill out a CASAC complaint form. The CASAC complaint form is available on the OASAS website. You can print it and write it out, but it is also available as PDF, so you can type it. This form can be submitted by anybody. We have it open to the public. Clients can submit one, family and friends can submit one. As a credentialed employee, however, you are required to submit one if you know of a violation of the Canon of ethics. It should be filled out as completely as possible within 24 hours of the incident. Again, you need to make sure the Justice Center gets the report first and take care of any emergency medical needs. But the CASAC complaint form should be submitted within 24 hours to OASAS. It is available on the OASAS website under the credentialing section, and it is a fairly straightforward form. You fill out what you have. Again, there's no need to be doing a fact-finding mission or anything. Report the information you have, and then OASAS will take it from there. So Colleen is going to present the next 2 slides, which is talking a little bit more about where to report and what happens after that.
Thank you, Danielle. As you can see from the slide, there are times where you will need to report to both the Justice Center and OASAS, as Danielle was saying. Primarily when there is alleged abuse by a credentialed staff person, or again, a person in the process of becoming credentialed, you will need to report to the Justice Center and to OASAS using the OASAS complaint form. If there's alleged neglect by a credentialed staff person, this also gets reported to both the Justice Center and OASAS. And again, as Danielle was saying, a significant incident by a credentialed staff person will need to be reported to both agencies. Examples of this are for a staff member who works at an outpatient clinic is alleged to be transporting their client to AA meetings. This allegation should be reported to both agencies and will likely be assigned as either a non-New York Justice Center case or a significant incident. This would then be assigned to OASAS to look into. This report should also be reported to OASAS on the complaint form as stated. Another example, when a staff person is alleged to be in a relationship with a previous client of their agency, though not their direct client. There are several factors in this situation which would impact how the Justice Center classifies the report. However, it is important to note that no fact-finding or other type of investigation should be done to gather more information than what is needed to make the report. Again, this allegation should also be reported on the CASAC complaint form. If a report is classified as an abuse and neglect case by the Justice Center, it will be investigated by the Justice Center first. After the Justice Center closes their case, OASAS will review the report again and determine if an additional investigation needs to be done by the OASAS investigation unit. OASAS completes the investigations based on the Canon of Ethics, so while the Justice Center may determine the allegation is unsubstantiated, OASAS may still take action. This most commonly happens regarding professional boundaries based on how the Justice Center defines a person receiving services as someone currently in treatment. OASAS maintains once a client, always a client. An unsubstantiated case of sexual abuse might be unsubstantiated by the Justice Center, but OASAS may revoke a person's CASAC. This scenario is most likely to happen when a staff member engages in an unprofessional relationship after the client has been discharged from treatment. So possible outcomes from a CASAC complaint and investigation. The committee may determine that a complaint is unsubstantiated, and from there, no further action would be required. If the committee determines that a complaint is substantiated, a letter of warning could be issued. Additional trainings may be recommended to the counselor for their own benefit and knowledge. The committee can also issue an administrative reprimand to the counselor where additional education and training will be required, and this requires an outcome report being made to the National Practitioners Data Bank. Another option for the committee, based on the investigation and the complaint, could be a suspension of somebody's CASAC or CASAC trainee or other credential. For a determined amount of time, the suspension can be determined based on the findings, along with additional education and training for the counselor. And this determination will also require an outcome report being made to the National Practitioners Data Bank. Another option for the committee would be to revoke somebody's CASAC again, or other credential. A revocation is for a minimum of 5 years, and this also requires an outcome report being made to the National Practitioners Data Bank. The last option would be to deny somebody's application. Again, for a determined amount of time, the committee can decide how long the application would be denied for based on the findings. If a renewal application is denied, an outcome report is also made to the National Practitioners Data Bank.
So that's it for the presentation. I know there's a lot of information and there's plenty that people might have more questions about, but here's some of the key takeaways that I hope you got from this presentation. Staff members are the ones responsible for maintaining professional boundaries. You are the person who has the power in the counselor-client relationship. You are the person that has the responsibility in the client-counselor relationship. We also know that boundary violations are varied and can occur unintentionally. Our example was our CASAC-T, Kenneth. He didn't know that he was triggering Molly when he reached and grabbed something out of her hair. In his head, he was trying to help her. So that was a boundary violation, even though unintentional. Staff are mandated reporters for the Justice Center. We have to remember that making reports to the Justice Center is required by law, and nobody can stop you from making a report. This is something that you are supported in, and though your agency might have policy about ensuring internal steps are taken, they cannot stop you from making a report to the Justice Center. We also now know that staff are mandated reporters for OASAS. If you are credentialed, if you're applying for a credential, or if the person is a credentialed staff or applying for a credential, we have our CASAC complaint form available on the OASAS website. And again, this is available to the public for anybody. If there is something if somebody's doing something that violates the canon of ethics, not just for professional boundaries, but specifically for professional boundaries for the sake of this training, it is your responsibility to make sure OASAS gets that form. And with that, we are finished with this presentation. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Danielle and Colleen for joining me today. Hope you all find it useful while assisting clients in need of services. Your feedback's important to us. It helps us to know if we're meeting your educational goals and expectations. Once you have viewed the presentation in its entirety and completed the quiz, Please follow directions to access the SurveyMonkey website and take a moment to complete the evaluation, including suggesting any future topics for Learning Thursdays. Once again, thank you for joining us and keep up the good work.